The Great War was supposed to be the war to end all wars. It was not. It left behind a world full of scars, both visible and invisible. Nations were broken, economies were shattered. A generation of young men had been lost in the mud of the trenches. In Germany, the Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, was not seen as a path to peace, but as a deep and lasting humiliation. The treaty demanded massive payments, called reparations, that crippled the German economy. People were hungry. Their money became worthless. They felt betrayed, and in that fertile ground of despair, a dark seed began to grow. A man named Adolf Hitler, a failed artist and a former soldier, found his voice in this national resentment. He spoke to the fears of the German people. He promised to restore their pride, to rebuild their nation, and to reclaim the lands he said were stolen from them. His words were like a siren song to a population desperate for hope. In Italy, Benito Mussolini and his fascist party had already seized control, dreaming of a new Roman Empire. In Japan, military leaders held great influence over the emperor. On the other side stood the Allied powers, an alliance that formed more out of necessity than shared vision. Initially, it was led by Great Britain and France. The United States, for a time, remained on the sidelines. On September 1st, 1939, at dawn, German forces poured across the border into Poland. This was blitzkrieg in action. The following year, 1940, saw the storm break over Western Europe. After a period of quiet known as the Phony War, the German war machine roared back to life. Hundreds of small boats braved German bombs to evacuate over 338,000 soldiers. In London and other cities, the Blitz began. Night after night, bombs rained down, turning homes into rubble. Subway stations became shelters, but the British people did not break. June 1941. Hitler betrayed his pact with Stalin and launched Operation Barbarossa. It was the largest land invasion in history. The German advance ground to a halt in the snow and ice outside Moscow. For the common soldier, the war was not about grand strategy or political maneuvering. It was a daily struggle for survival, a life reduced to its most basic elements. Finding food, staying warm, just keeping your head down, the whistle of incoming artillery, the chatter of a machine gun, the drone of bombers overhead. They fought in every imaginable landscape. Every environment presented its own unique brand of misery. The bond between soldiers was often the only thing that kept them going. The man in the foxhole next to you was your lifeline. His survival was tied to yours. While soldiers fought on distant battlefields, the war came home to ordinary people in ways they could never have imagined. The air raid siren was the soundtrack of daily life, a wail that sent families scrambling into Anderson shelters. Survival became a matter of making do with less. With so many resources diverted to the war effort, rationing was introduced. People planted victory gardens in parks, backyards, and public squares. Nothing was wasted. The war transformed society, especially for women. They poured into factories, building the planes, tanks, and bullets that the armies so desperately needed. Rosie the Riveter in America, the land girls in Britain, the night witches in the Soviet Union. For families, the hardest part was the waiting. Every knock on the door could be the postman with a letter from the front. Or it could be a telegram, the dreaded piece of paper that brought the worst possible news. By 1944, the tide of the war was slowly but surely turning against the Axis. The time had come to open a new front in the West. For months, southern England had become a massive military camp, filled with millions of soldiers and a staggering amount of equipment. Then, at dawn on June 6th, D-Day, the main invasion force hit the beaches. Under a sky grey with naval gunfire and a sea choked with landing craft, soldiers stormed ashore into a storm of German machine gun fire. The fighting on the beaches was horrific, especially at a place codenamed Omaha Beach. It was through sheer grit, courage, and the bravery of junior officers taking charge that they finally broke through the German defences and established a foothold. They fought their way through the hedgerows of Normandy, liberated Paris in August, and began the long, hard push toward Germany. By the spring of 1945, Allied armies were crossing the Rhine River into Germany from the west, while the Soviets were closing in on Berlin from the east. The end was in sight, but it would be paid for with thousands more lives. And the final days of the war in Europe were a desperate, violent collapse. On May 8, 1945, VE Day, Germany surrendered unconditionally. To avoid a costly invasion of Japan, President Truman authorized the use of the atomic bomb. On August 6, 1945, a single bomb was dropped on Hiroshima. The Second World War was officially over. The world that emerged from the rubble was forever changed. Over 60 million people were dead. Entire cities lay in ruins. The Holocaust's horrors were revealed to a shocked world. Systematic genocide. Yet amidst devastation, there was hope. The sacrifice of millions had defeated monstrous tyranny. From the ashes, institutions like the United Nations were born. The stories of the soldiers who fought, the civilians who endured, and the families who waited serve as a timeless reminder of the price of freedom. They are a legacy written in blood and bravery, a solemn vow to remember and to strive for a better, more peaceful world.